He hit the pavement so hard it cracked beneath his shoulder. Derek, 6'3" and armed with a blade, folded like a chair in front of 50 silent witnesses. His knife spun out of his hand, skittered across the sidewalk, and came to a stop at the feet of a boy holding his phone, streaming the whole damn thing live. Claire didn't flinch. She didn't gloat. She stood there in her hoodie, breathing steady, as if the fight hadn't even touched her. A police cruiser screeched in seconds too late, and the first officer out shouted, "Where's the weapon?" Another pointed to the blade on the ground. The rookie scanned the scene, then stared at Claire. No, hers. Nobody answered, because she didn't need one. Derek groaned on the ground, broken and humiliated, trying to crawl but barely moving. His mouth worked, but no words came. Someone in the crowd whispered, "She dropped him like it was training." A woman gasped. "That was training?" A pause stretched long, like the city itself was trying to catch its breath. The crowd didn't cheer. They stared. Something in the way she moved made it clear. This wasn't luck. It was history. The boy with the phone whispered to his stream. She just said no. He pulled a knife, and He shook his head, couldn't finish. The footage went viral before the paramedics even arrived. But the moment it really began, the moment none of them could forget, was when she stepped into that alley 30 seconds earlier. Derek sat against the wall, wrists locked in steel, blood drying around his mouth as he tried to shield his face from cameras he couldn't escape. His breath shallow, pride shattered, every movement slow, like he was moving through concrete. The officers didn't bother talking to him. They'd seen enough. The clip was already circling every platform, people tagging it, freezing frames, zooming in on her stance, her precision, her control. But none of that mattered to Claire. She stood a few feet away, back straight, eyes clear, watching him only to make sure he stayed down. Her jaw set, body relaxed, no adrenaline crash, just calm. A woman in her 50s pushed through the crowd, not to film, not to stare, but to touch her arm and say thank you, not in shock, but in something deeper, something like pride, she said. Her daughter walked that street every day, said no one ever did anything, when men followed women like ghosts. Claire didn't answer, just nodded once. The kind of nod that meant she heard it and carried it. Another girl, barely 20, stood off to the side, hands clutching a book bag. She looked at Claire like she was seeing a different species, said she thought she knew how to fight, thought one self-defense class was enough, but now she wasn't sure. Said watching Claire made her realize how far she still had to go. Claire didn't offer advice, didn't lecture, she just met her eyes, long enough for the girl to understand. Fear only wins if you let it, and courage doesn't need noise to matter. The cops finished their sweep, chalked the blade, collected the footage. Even the sergeant who arrived last stayed silent, eventually said, "No charges, clearly self-defense." Said it with respect. The kind that didn't come easy, especially from someone who'd seen what he just saw. One reporter showed up late, tried to push through, shout questions about who Claire was, where she trained, what people should learn from this. Claire looked at him and said nothing, just stepped back, picked up her bag, and moved through the crowd like they weren't there. The air opened around her like water parting. No one stood in her way, not out of fear, but because they knew she'd earned space. Someone in the crowd started clapping, but stopped halfway, like applause didn't fit. Most just watched, trying to understand how someone like her existed in a world where strength was always loud. Across the street, a boy stood on a mailbox filming, whispered that she was gone now, vanished into the city like she'd never been there. But he knew he'd remember her face. Behind him, a store owner locked his doors early, said, maybe the city was safer now, not just because Derek was off the street, but because people had seen what was possible. Another officer asked if they should get her a ride. His partner shook his head, said she didn't look like someone who needed an escort. The live stream replayed on someone's screen, slowed down, paused at the moment Claire struck, comments pouring in. Not just emojis or applause, but real stories. Women saying they'd been cornered, grabbed, followed, and had frozen. Men saying they'd underestimated what someone calm and quiet could do. Parents saying they were signing daughters up for training tomorrow. Strangers admitting they'd never look at a silent person the same way again. And in that digital wildfire, Claire disappeared from coverage, from questions, from noise. Because what she had to say was already said in movement. She didn't need interviews, didn't need headlines, she needed space, and she took it. A silent walk back into the city's noise. The kind of walk that doesn't demand anything, but leaves an imprint, and the crowd was left different, not just in how they looked at her, but in how they looked at each other, like a layer of safety had peeled off and been replaced by awareness, the kind that lingers long after the footage stops playing. Near the alley, a rookie cop stood frozen, watching the replay on his phone, said he'd never seen someone that fast, that deliberate. And the sergeant next to him muttered, "She wasn't fast, she was ready. There's a difference, always has been." A man in the back of the crowd turned and said to no one in particular. He used to think silence meant weakness. Now he wasn't so sure. Now he wasn't going to assume anymore. Claire turned a corner, bag over her shoulder, hood shifting slightly as she moved forward into a city that had just seen her truth. But the moment that changed everything wasn't when she fought or when she won. It was when she stepped into that alley and chose not to give him anything. Not her bag, not her fear, and not her silence. Claire moved fast but not rushed, weaving through the late crowd like she'd walked this street 100 times, her bag over one shoulder, earphones in, but the volume low enough to hear footsteps behind her. The city buzzed with familiar chaos. Vendors closing shop, cars honking at lights, someone laughing too loudly into a phone. But her attention narrowed when she caught the second pair of footsteps behind her. Close. Not casual, consistent. She glanced at a store window. Didn't look back directly, her reflection told her enough. Male, tall, close. Hoodie pulled up, hands in the front pocket, her grip on the strap tightened slightly. She took one more block before slowing her pace just enough to let him catch up. When she turned left into the alley, she didn't hesitate, not because it was safe, but because it was clear. No traffic, no noise, just one long stretch of exposed concrete and brick. Halfway through, she heard the shift, the shuffle of a step changing direction, a decision being made, then the voice, low and sharp, close enough to hit. "Drop the bag!" And she turned, faced him full on. Derek stepped in fast, aggressive, knife out, already raised like he'd done this before, like he expected fear to freeze her. He was taller by at least a foot, broader, heavier, his stance wide, blade forward, but Claire didn't flinch. She didn't speak, didn't bargain. She scanned him once, eyes locking on wrist angle, shoulder tension, foot placement, breathing rhythm, alley layout, her exit options. Then without a word, she knelt, slow and controlled, placing the bag on the ground, like it didn't matter, like she wasn't giving it up, but setting it aside, her breathing steady, her hands visible. Derek didn't know what to do with that. Hesitation cracked through his smirk. He shifted his grip, took half a step closer. She didn't move, not yet. The alley behind her empty. No witnesses, just the echo of his shoes against the walls. He said it again, louder. "I said drop it," though she already had. She looked up at him, met his eyes, unblinking, and that's when everything locked into place. Her weight balanced, right foot pivoted slightly, hands still open. She was waiting, not retreating. Derek thought he had her, thought size and steel would end it before it started. He didn't notice her breath sink, didn't notice the slight flex in her knees, didn't see what someone trained would have caught instantly. She wasn't frozen, she was calculating. Derek raised the knife, stepped in, sharp and reckless, and Claire moved, not back but forward, not defensive but direct. And the last thing Derek saw before the pain hit was the way her eyes didn't change, didn't blink, didn't doubt, just followed the motion of his shoulder and broke it down in real time, not in panic, but with precision. Because Claire didn't wait for the right moment, she made it happen. Derek took another step forward, his grin wide and careless, like he thought the fight was already his. "You really think someone like you can take someone like me?" he said, half laughing, half testing, loud enough for the alley walls to carry his voice back at him. His eyes scanned her slowly, not for threat, but for weakness. And when he didn't see fear, he thought she was faking it, acting tough, bluffing. Someone up the block noticed them, slowed down but didn't stop. Pulled out a phone, started filming, not helping, not calling for backup, just watching, like it was a show, like she was some character in a viral clip waiting to get hurt. Claire didn't look at the bystander, didn't acknowledge the phone. All her focus stayed locked on Derek, his weight shifting from foot to foot, his left shoulder twitching each time he spoke, his grip on the knife too tight, flexed in a way that told her he wasn't trained, just dangerous, impulsive, sloppy. His knees weren't bent enough, his elbows too far out. Small things. But they mattered. His breathing was uneven, his feet too loud on the concrete. His hands kept fidgeting like he wasn't fully committed. He shoved her lightly with his free hand, the testing, trying to see if she'd flinch. She didn't. She took half a step back, not stumbling, just giving space, adjusting stance. Her feet repositioned faster than his brain registered. She was still, but not passive. Her arms hung at her sides, but tension ran up her spine like a loaded spring. Derek noticed the lack of reaction and barked louder. "I said give it to me," pointing the knife straight at her chest now. A cheap folding blade, but sharp enough to kill if used with rage and surprise, neither of which Claire was giving him. "I don't have time for games, girl," he added, and this time, when he stepped in, he swung. Not a trained strike, just a wild chopping motion meant to scare or slice. But Claire ducked without panic, slipped to his side, not fast but clean, fluid. Her left hand grazed the inside of his forearm to measure reach, her right ready to counter if he followed through. He didn't. Not fully, not yet. Because when she moved like that, something in him paused. Some primitive instinct tried to signal that she wasn't reacting like victims do. He shook it off and sneered, "What are you, some kind of YouTube fighter?" Then laughed short and mean. "Bet you learned that at a weekend seminar." And for a moment, he paced in front of her, blade still up, making a show of dominance like he wanted the camera catching it all to see him in charge. Claire held her ground, never lunging, never baiting, just recalibrating the distance every time he moved. He stepped to her left, and she shifted her weight, slight angle, no drama, no wasted motion. "You're quiet now," he said, voice lower, more annoyed. "What, nothing clever to say?" And when she still didn't speak, he snapped, "Say something." Like he needed her to break just so he could feel right about doing this. Claire looked him in the eyes, not defiant, not afraid, just focused. And that silence pressed down harder than any insult, because it meant she wasn't reacting the way he wanted. It meant he wasn't controlling the room like he thought. From the corner of the street, 2 more people stopped, saw the knife, saw her stillness. One pulled out a phone, the other backed away quickly. Another couple paused at the alley entrance, unsure whether to intervene or run. The camera caught Derek laughing again, blade waving like he owned the air between them. "Go ahead, take your best shot," he said mockingly, raising both arms slightly as if daring her to move, like he wanted to humiliate her before hurting her. "Or are you just going to stand there and wait for someone to save you?" he jeered. Claire breathed slow through her nose, calm, eyes scanning again. Small twitch in his hip before he lunged, minor pivot in his lead foot. She caught it all, processed it in silence because her training wasn't showy, wasn't about words or warning. It was about angles, timing, and outcome. Derek stepped closer again, blade inches away. And this time, he said it lower, sharper. "Last chance." Like he believed that mattered, Claire adjusted her foot again, just slightly, just enough to be ready. And behind her, the echo of a distant train rumbled through the alley, covering the sound of her breath. Derek thought she was hesitating, saw stillness as weakness again, stepped forward with more confidence, more weight, and muttered, "That's what I thought," as he pulled his shoulder back for a strike. But by then, Claire already had him mapped, joint position, elbow height, knife speed, space between his ribs and her shoulder. Her entire body was ready, and though she hadn't said a word, everything about her posture now said one thing clear as a shout. She wasn't there to be rescued. She was there to end it. The moment she moved, something in the air shifted, not just the distance between her and Derek, but the way people were seeing her. Even the ones watching from behind a screen started to sense it. The difference wasn't loud. It was calculated, tight, and exact. Across the street, a man in his 30s slowed down, phone halfway out of his pocket. He had seen scuffles before, street fights, robberies. But the way she stepped sideways, the way her weight shifted evenly across both legs, made him pause. He muttered to no one, "She's trained," and stopped walking, started recording. Inside a nearby cafe, a plainclothes officer sitting near the window had already noticed the commotion, the knife, the crowd. He put down his coffee and brought up his phone, zoomed the camera toward Claire. His partner glanced up from her laptop, squinted, then frowned. "That pivot she just did, that's not instinct. He nodded, hit record, leaned forward. She's not moving like someone improvising, that's drilled, and not just some Krav Maga hobby class, that's controlled under pressure. More people were gathering now, not a mob, not loud, but observant, uncertain, drawn in by the stillness around her. The tension was no longer just about danger. It was about control, the kind that made others reassess what they were looking at. One teenage boy with a skateboard whispered, "She hasn't thrown a punch, but it feels like she already won." And another nodded, watching through his phone like it was a live feed from something official, like training footage leaked from a combat test. And the truth was, even Derek was starting to notice. He didn't say it, but his pauses were longer now, his swings slower, not from fatigue, but confusion. She wasn't reacting the way he expected, wasn't giving him the emotional fuel most people did. Her eyes didn't beg or plead, they just tracked, calculated, evaluated. He kept moving like he had the upper hand, but somewhere in him, that assumption was cracking. Claire noticed the shift too, not in his words, but in his weight, in the way his feet hesitated before closing the gap. She hadn't done much yet, just tested timing, distance, his level of commitment, but she already had the advantage. She didn't show it, didn't exploit it yet, because reading him was more important than beating him fast. Near the back of the growing circle, a woman held her phone low, face pale, murmured, "I've seen her before," and scrolled quickly through her photos. Her brother leaned over her shoulder. "Where?" And she turned the screen, showing a picture from an old local news piece. A younger Claire, hair pulled back, gloves up, standing on a podium with a bruised eye and a gold medal around her neck. "That's her, Claire Rhodes. She fought pro." He looked again, blinked. "But she disappeared like 5 years ago, right?" She nodded. After her sister vanished, she stopped showing up to events. Someone nearby overheard, asked, "You sure it's her?" The woman nodded again. "She trained with the Arizona circuit, fought in Vegas twice, undefeated." Another voice chimed in. "Wait, the one who took down Silva in 2 rounds? I thought she got injured." And then silence, a kind of hush that came from realization, passing from one person to another. Inside the cafe, the plainclothes officer got a hit on facial recognition, pulled up a file, slid his phone toward his partner. "It's her," he said. "Claire Rhodes, former military hand-to-hand instructor, left service early 2016, private sector contract work after that, then nothing." His partner scrolled the record. No criminal record, no public appearances in years. Then she shows up in an alley with a guy holding a knife and doesn't flinch. Across the street, 2 kids live streaming now had viewers commenting faster than they could read. Names were being dropped, old fight clips reposted, moments of Claire in the ring, controlled, fast, surgical, now played side by side with the real-time stream of her, standing still in that alley, and suddenly it all clicked. She wasn't just brave, she wasn't lucky. She was built for this, trained for it, refined through repetition. Most people couldn't imagine, and while the world saw a hoodie and a calm face, those who looked closer saw a weapon walking on 2 feet. Derek finally saw it too. Though he couldn't put it into words, he just knew something was wrong. He couldn't shake the quiet in her movements, the way she made space without fear, the way she kept her balance even when he pushed her. He had seen people panic, beg, run, lash out, but not this clarity, and it rattled him, just enough to make him sloppy. Claire kept her breathing even, watched him try to find confidence in volume, in motion, in insults, but she knew it was slipping. She had no need to taunt. Her silence did the work, and the crowd was starting to understand why. One older man said softly, "She's not defending herself anymore. She's dismantling him." And a younger woman near him added, "And she hasn't even touched him yet." The moment before the impact was no longer about a man with a knife threatening a woman. It had turned into something else, something surgical, inevitable, like gravity taking over a falling object. The plainclothes cop stood up, slid his badge into his jacket just in case. "We're not watching a victim," he said to no one. "We're watching an operator." And outside, the final seconds ticked down as Derek made one last move, thinking he still had time, not knowing he was already out of it. Derek lunged forward, blade angled low, full weight behind it. Eyes locked on Claire like he was going to finish it in one strike, but she moved before he finished the thought, her body turning sharply. Left hand snapping up to redirect his forearm, not just blocking but collapsing the joint structure mid-motion, her thumb pressing against the tendon, while her shoulder drove power through the twist. The knife never touched her. It slid past, useless, and in the same second, she swept her leg low, right foot targeting his left ankle with surgical precision, the kind you only get from thousands of reps. His leg buckled, momentum betrayed him. His upper body kept going, lower body gave out. He hit the pavement hard, shoulder first, blade clattering across the concrete and spinning out of reach. The crowd gasped, phones shook in hands that couldn't stay still. Derek tried to scramble up, hand reaching for the knife, but Claire was already on him. Her knee drove down onto his wrist, pinning it. Her other leg coiled around his upper arm, locking it in place, her body folded forward, shoulder pressed down into his neck. Not enough to choke, just enough to immobilize, to control. No wasted effort, no flare, just finality. Derek squirmed, grunted, tried to twist out, but her weight shifted with him, adapting, every counter a reset he couldn't win. Her face stayed calm, no rage, no panic, just the trained detachment of someone who understood exactly how much force was needed, no more, no less. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Oh my God," and another backed away, realizing they had just watched something more than self-defense. This wasn't survival, this was execution-level control. A street-level takedown delivered with the discipline of a soldier. The camera angles caught everything. The torque of her hips, the framing of her knees, the way her elbow never left the tight window between his jaw and collarbone. A textbook isolation technique. Pressure applied with just enough resistance to keep him alive and helpless. Derek kept bucking, but the motion got smaller each time. His free hand slapped the ground once, twice, like he wanted to tap out but didn't know how. Claire didn't let up until she felt the tendon in his wrist stop straining. Only then did she lean back, release the hold cleanly, stand up, take 2 steps back, never turning her back on him. The alley had gone dead silent. Even the air felt locked in place. Nobody breathed until Derek groaned and rolled halfway onto his side, the knife still lying 4 feet away, untouched. A sergeant pushed through the outer edge of the crowd, his badge clipped to his vest. Eyes narrowed as he took in the scene, the limp man, the motionless knife, the woman standing still with no sign of injury or aggression. "Which unit were you with?" he asked. Not hostile, just blunt. Like someone recognizing a pattern, Claire didn't answer, didn't acknowledge him, just stared down at Derek one last time, not with anger, not with pride, just with certainty. Then she picked up her bag from where it had been left, checked the contents briefly, slung it over her shoulder, and walked away. The sergeant didn't stop her. Neither did the officers arriving behind him. They'd seen the footage, heard the silence, understood something rare had just happened, something that didn't need permission or applause. The live stream hit record highs in minutes, replayed frame by frame across news feeds and reaction channels, each breakdown circling the same truth. She was trained, she was calm, and she was done. People watching tried to name what she had done, but the terms weren't enough. It wasn't self-defense. It was system override, predator neutralized without escalation, law and motion meeting in the body of someone who didn't flinch. She didn't linger, didn't explain, didn't wait for validation. She walked out of the alley into the fading light like she was on schedule, like this was just something that needed to be handled. And now it was. Derek sat up slowly, holding his shoulder, eyes unfocused, mouth open but saying nothing. Someone helped him lean against the wall. Someone else picked up the knife with a gloved hand and bagged it. Officers moved in now, slowly, not rushing, not tense, just orderly, like the danger had left with her. One of them muttered to another, "We almost didn't need to show up," and his partner said, "We didn't." Far down the block, Claire turned a corner, out of sight, out of range, but not out of mind. Behind her, phones buzzed, sirens clicked off, and in a dozen different languages, people told the same story. Not about a fight, but about how it ended, not with a shout, but with a level of skill that made shouting pointless. Some said she was special forces. Others thought she was some kind of legend that disappeared from the circuit. A few just called her what she was in that moment, prepared, a woman who made a decision and followed it through with zero hesitation. While the world watched and learned that sometimes silence isn't fear, it's focus. In the hours that followed, news crews arrived, questions flew, but answers didn't come. The footage spoke for itself. Pundits debated motive and background. Networks replayed the same 10 seconds on loop, asking if it was luck or design, but the answer was obvious to those who knew what to look for. It wasn't instinct, it was architecture. Strategy pressed into muscle memory, built not to impress, but to survive and dominate. Parents rewound the footage and showed it to their daughters. Trainers paused the video to highlight her footwork. Security experts broke it down as a model scenario, and somewhere, quietly, people started Googling her name. Forums lit up with old competition footage, sparring sessions, even grainy footage of her military exhibitions. Comments poured in, most praising, some questioning how someone could walk away from that life and vanish so completely, others wondering if she had ever truly left. Meanwhile, Claire walked 6 blocks in silence, down a side street, past a mural half faded from sun and time, into a laundromat that smelled like bleach and burnt fabric. She opened a locker, changed her hoodie, swapped shoes, cleaned her hands in the sink, and left by the back door. No one in the shop had noticed her arrive, and none saw her leave. She didn't disappear because she was afraid. She vanished because she was finished. The mission, whatever it was to her, was complete, and she had no interest in debriefing a world that had already judged her by the wrong metrics. She gave no statements, left no message, and by nightfall, Claire Rhodes had become something between a myth and a warning, and the city, without knowing how, felt a little different. Some said she walked away because she had to. Others said it was because she didn't trust what came after, because real justice rarely follows real action. They guessed she'd had to live with choices that no one else could see, carry the kind of weight that didn't fade with medals or apologies. Maybe she was tired of being someone people called only when things were already broken. Maybe she wanted quiet and found it in that alley the moment she ended what needed to be ended. By morning, street artists had already stenciled her silhouette on the walls where it happened. Headlines softened from shock to reverence. Think pieces followed. Some asked if Claire was a symbol. Others asked why she had to do what trained men didn't. And still others didn't ask anything at all. They just watched the video again and again, frame by frame, waiting for the part where hesitation never came. Later that week, buried deep in a Reddit thread, under a shaky cell phone clip titled, "Woman Disarms Attacker Like a Damn Navy SEAL," one comment stood out. Not upvoted for shock or drama, but for how plainly it told the truth. It read, "I used to think regular people couldn't fight back, that we're just targets if someone really wants to hurt us. But that day, watching her, I learned I was wrong." Others replied, shared similar moments, places they froze, places they wished they had stepped forward. But Claire never entered the conversation. She didn't post, didn't comment, didn't correct anyone. When a major network asked for an interview, her response came through a short email from a temporary address. No statement. And that was it. She declined every request, ignored every call, never stepped forward to claim the story the world was building around her. Because it was never about being seen. It was about doing what had to be done. One instructor at a self-defense gym said he'd shown the footage to every new student since. Paused it at the moment. Claire made contact and said, "This isn't luck. This is readiness." And students stopped laughing after that. One detective who'd reviewed the video for the 5th time muttered, "She didn't just survive him, she erased the threat." And that stuck with him longer than most cases ever did. But the comment on Reddit ended with something quieter, something the others didn't say. Not everyone who stays quiet is weak. Some people are just waiting for the right moment to speak. And that line hit different, not just because it was true, but because it forced people to look around and ask who they were ignoring, underestimating, walking past without a second thought. Claire didn't disappear to be a mystery. She stepped away because she had nothing left to prove, and sometimes that's louder than any headline. So if you've ever watched someone get underestimated and then shut an entire crowd up with one decision, one action, one clean break from expectation, now's the time to tell that story because someone else needs to hear it.